My art spoke volumes, but I whispered my truth.
This curated vision promises freedom.
But at what price?
Some treasures are
Some
too
masterpieces
valuable to
hide a
lose.
darker
Some
artist.
truths too sharp to ignore. I remember Austin feeling like a canvas back then, an open invitation. I was 28, a freelance graphic designer, and my head was always buzzing with ideas, shapes, colors. My work was good, I knew it, but there was always this quiet hum of self-doubt just beneath the surface, a fear that my art was too specific to me. I loved the intricate details, the stories behind the lines, the way a truly unique design could make you pause. But sometimes I worried it wasn't broad enough, wasn't marketable. It was a vulnerability I mostly kept hidden, even from myself. Then Chloe walked into my world, or rather, scrolled into it. She was a social media influencer, a whirlwind of charisma and perfectly curated aesthetics. Her feed was all sun-drenched brunch spots, effortlessly chic outfits, and profound-sounding captions about authenticity and connection. When we met in person at a pop-up art market, I had a small booth showcasing some of my more experimental pieces. It felt like the universe had orchestrated it. She stopped at my display, her eyes lingering on a particularly complex abstract piece I'd almost decided not to bring. "This," she said, her voice a low, knowing murmur. "This has soul. It's raw, it's honest. So many designers are just churning out generic stuff. But you get it." Her words were like cool water on a parched throat. "Someone saw me. Someone got me." She talked about her brand, how she was looking for a designer who could truly capture her essence, elevate her vision. She made it sound like she saw the depth in my work, the very thing I sometimes feared was a weakness. We talked for hours that day, about art, about life, about the struggle to create something meaningful in a world obsessed with fleeting trends. I felt an immediate, undeniable connection. It was exhilarating. She even mentioned my artistic soul, a phrase that resonated deeply, silencing that anxious hum of self-doubt for a precious while. She promised we could create something incredible together, something that would put both our names on the map. It felt like destiny, a chance to finally let my work shine, guided by someone who truly understood its value. I started spending more and more time at her apartment, a sleek, minimalist space that felt miles away from my own slightly chaotic studio. The initial projects for Chloe were exciting. I poured my heart into them, creating bespoke graphics for her posts, intricate story templates, and a fresh logo that perfectly captured the effortless chic vibe she cultivated. She'd praise my work publicly, often posting glowing captions about my unparalleled talent and how lucky she was to collaborate with such a visionary artist. My friends would see her posts and congratulate me, telling me how great it was that I was getting such exposure. I felt seen, validated. But then came the private critiques, always delivered with a soft smile and a gentle tone that made them sound like helpful advice, never criticism. We'd be hunched over her laptop, and she'd point to a detail I'd spent hours perfecting. "Mateo, this is brilliant, truly," she'd say, her finger tracing a delicate line. "But it's a little intense for my audience, don't you think? They just want something light, inspiring. This might be a bit too intellectual for the masses." Or sometimes, after I presented an idea I was particularly proud of, something conceptually rich, she'd sigh lightly. "It's beautiful, darling, really, but it's just so niche. We need something more marketable, something that screams aspirational, without making people think too hard." She had a way of framing it, always implying that my best ideas, the ones that felt most authentic to me, were somehow lacking, not quite hitting the mark for her brand vision. It wasn't an outright rejection. It was a slow, subtle chipping away. She'd suggest tweaks, always pushing for a simpler, more generic aesthetic, one that felt less like my signature and more like a template. And I, eager for her approval, desperate to prove I could be marketable, would bend. I'd rework, simplify, dilute. Each time, a tiny piece of my original vision would get filed away, replaced by something she deemed on brand. The future opportunities she'd promised, the big paid projects that would follow this initial collaborative phase, were always just around the corner, always contingent on me first perfectly aligning with her standards. I believed her, pouring more and more of myself into her projects, convinced that if I just worked harder, If I just understood her vision better, those opportunities would finally materialize. The days bled into weeks, then months. My own creative projects, the ones that used to fill me with energy, started gathering dust. My personal social media presence, once a vibrant showcase of my unique style, dwindled to almost nothing. I was so focused on being enough for Chloe, on meeting her ever-shifting, elusive standards, that I forgot to be enough for myself. My portfolio, once a source of pride, felt stagnant, filled with work that was technically competent but devoid of my true voice. I was creating for Chloe, not for Mateo. My friends started to ask why I hadn't posted anything new, why my personal design page looked so quiet. I'd brush them off, mumbling about being busy with a big, exclusive client. It sounded impressive on the surface, but the truth was, I felt increasingly empty, creatively drained. Chloe's critiques became more frequent, more direct, though still cloaked in that same gentle, concerned tone. She'd often say, "You know, your early work, it was very raw, very emotional. But for what I do, we need something more polished, more universally appealing. You have to think about the algorithm, Mateo." The algorithm. It became this faceless entity she invoked, a convenient scapegoat for why my too intellectual ideas just wouldn't fly. She'd sometimes show me examples of other designers, their work slick and undeniably popular, and say, "See, this is what people respond to. This is where the industry is going. You just need to pivot, darling." I started to internalize her words, believing that my unique artistic voice was indeed a hindrance, something to be overcome. I'd sit at my desk, staring at a blank screen, trying to conjure designs that felt generic enough, palatable enough, for Chloe's audience, for the masses. The joy of creation slowly seeped out of me. Austin, once a city of inspiration, began to feel like a cage. My studio, once a sanctuary, became a place of quiet frustration. I'd spend hours perfecting a graphic for her, only for her to suggest a minor change that fundamentally altered its character, making it bland. And I'd comply, because what choice did I have? The promise of exposure, of being part of something big, still dangled like a carrot. I was constantly chasing her approval, convinced that once I finally cracked the code, once I finally delivered something that met her unspoken, ever-rising standards, I would be rewarded. But the reward never came. Only more work, more subtle dismissals of my inherent talent. My confidence evaporated, leaving behind a hollow ache where my vibrant creativity used to be. I was so deep in it, so consumed by Chloe's world, that I barely recognized myself anymore. My sleep schedule was a mess. My diet consisted mostly of lukewarm coffee and whatever takeout I could grab between revisions. My friends, the few I still saw, would comment on how tired I looked, how I seemed to have lost that sparkle in my eyes when I talked about design. I'd just shrug, offering vague explanations about demanding clients and the hustle of freelance life. Inside, I felt like a machine, churning out content on demand, my own creative well running dry. The vibrant colors of my early work had faded to muted tones, reflecting the state of my own spirit. I remembered one evening, sitting in my studio, trying to sketch out something for myself, just for the sheer joy of it. My hand felt alien, unfamiliar with the freedom of expression. Every line I drew, every color I considered, was immediately filtered through Chloe's voice in my head. Asterisk too busy, too niche, not marketable. Asterisk I crumpled the paper in frustration, the sound echoing the collapse of my self-worth. It wasn't just about the design anymore, it was about my identity. Had I become nothing more than an extension of her brand? Had I lost the very essence of what made me Mateo, the artist? The thought was terrifying, a cold dread that settled deep in my chest. I felt like I was drowning, pulling myself deeper into this murky water, convinced that if I just kept swimming towards Chloe's light, I would eventually find air. But the light always seemed to recede, just beyond my grasp. Her validation had become my oxygen, and I was suffocating. I missed the days when my creativity felt like a boundless river. Now it was a trickle, barely sustaining me. The call came on a Tuesday, out of the blue. I was hunched over my laptop, tweaking a carousel post for Chloe, feeling that familiar dull ache of creative fatigue. The email subject line read, "Collaboration opportunity, major tech company name." I almost dismissed it as spam, but something made me click. It was a formal inquiry from a global tech giant, based right here in Austin. They were launching a new initiative, a creative campaign, and their team had been impressed by some of my early work, specifically, a series of independent digital art pieces I'd created and posted years ago, before Chloe. They wanted to discuss a lucrative contract. My heart hammered against my ribs. It was a jolt of pure, unadulterated hope, a feeling I hadn't realized I'd been missing so profoundly. This was it. This was the big break, the kind of opportunity I dreamed of, the kind Chloe had always vaguely promised. I felt a surge of validation, not from her, but from the professional world, recognizing the very niche work she had dismissed. I practically flew to Chloe's apartment, bursting with the news, expecting her to be thrilled, to finally see that my unique style had real value. I laid it all out, the email, the company name, the potential scope of the project. I watched her face, expecting pride, excitement. Instead, a subtle shift occurred. Her smile tightened. Her eyes, usually so warm and engaging, became cool, almost calculating. She took a slow sip of her oat milk latte. "Oh, Matteo," she said, her voice laced with a gentle pity that instantly put me on edge. "A tech company? For that kind of work? Honestly, it's a bit beneath my level of collaboration, isn't it? And darling, your style, it's just not quite refined enough for such a big client. They're looking for sleek, corporate, something ultramodern. Your artistic touch might just embarrass us both." The words hit me like a physical blow. Embarrass us both. My hope deflated, replaced by a cold, familiar dread. She then continued, "Besides, you're so busy with my projects. How would you even have time? You know we're on the cusp of something huge. This is just a distraction." I tried to argue, to explain how significant this was, how it could open so many doors. But she just waved a dismissive hand, already moving on to her next social media strategy. Later that evening, while I was preparing my portfolio for the preliminary meeting, something strange happened. I went to open the folder with my key pieces, the early, independent work the tech company had praised, and it was empty. Files gone. Deleted. My stomach dropped. I panicked, retracing my steps, wondering if I'd accidentally moved them. Chloe had been using my laptop earlier, helping me organize some files for her upcoming campaign. She'd even mentioned how cluttered my desktop was. I asked her about it, my voice trembling. "Oh, darling," she said, her eyes wide and innocent. "I must have accidentally deleted them while tidying up. So sorry. It was probably just old junk anyway, right?" "Old junk," I echoed, my voice barely a whisper. Those were the files that represented me, the true me, the designer who had just been recognized by a major company. But then, a flicker, a sudden, sharp memory of her accidentally deleting a draft of a personal project I'd been excited about months ago, claiming it was taking up too much space. And another, a time she'd lost a contact number I'd given her for a potential client, saying it was probably just a spam call anyway. It wasn't an accident. It couldn't be. The pieces clicked into place with a horrifying clarity. Her constant belittlement of my niche style, her insistence that my work wasn't marketable, her endless promises of future opportunities that never materialized, her subtle sabotage of anything that wasn't directly serving her. She never wanted me to succeed independently. She just wanted me to be a reflection of her own manufactured success, an unpaid, disposable tool in her carefully curated empire. The echo chamber she had built around me, filled with her voice and her doubts, shattered in that instant. All I heard was the ringing silence of my own truth. The rage that followed was a cold, pure fire. I retrieved my backup files from an external hard drive I always kept hidden, a habit I'd started years ago, before Chloe, born from a primal distrust of technology. As I restored them, each file reappearing on my screen felt like a defiant assertion of my own existence. I looked at the intricate designs, the bold colors, the stories woven into every line, and I saw not niche or unrefined, but me. And suddenly, that was more than enough. I cut ties with Chloe that very hour. There was no dramatic confrontation, no shouting match. I simply walked into her apartment, where she was meticulously staging a flat lay for an Instagram post, and calmly told her I was done. I wouldn't be designing another piece for her, not ever again. Her carefully composed face faltered for a second, a flash of genuine surprise. then quickly recomposed itself into a mask of wounded dignity. "Fine," she said, her voice tight. "If you're going to be so unprofessional, I suppose I can always find someone else who actually understands my vision." I just nodded, gathered my few belongings, and walked out without another word, leaving her to her manufactured reality. The air outside felt different, cleaner, sharper. I poured every ounce of that newfound clarity, that quiet rage, and that rediscovered passion into the tech company contract. The project was challenging, demanding, but I tackled it with a fierce joy I hadn't felt in years. I leaned into my niche, incorporating the storytelling elements and intricate details that were uniquely my own. The initial reviews were more than rave, they were ecstatic. The client praised my originality, my fresh perspective, my ability to connect with their audience on a deeper level. My too intellectual style was exactly what they needed. As I thrived, I watched Chloe's online persona begin to crack. Her content quality noticeably dropped without my unpaid labor. The bespoke graphics were replaced by generic stock photos, the intricate story templates by simple, uninspired layouts. Her follower count stagnated, then slowly started to decline. Her curated image of effortless success and collaboration began to fray at the edges. I understood then, truly understood, that her constant need to diminish me, to make me feel inadequate, stemmed from her own deep, gnawing fear of irrelevance in the fickle, ever-changing world of social media. Her influence was an empty shell, a performance without genuine talent or authentic connection to support it. She needed me to be small so she could feel big. Austin felt like my canvas again, but this time, I was painting my own masterpiece. My social media presence, once neglected, became a vibrant hub of my renewed creativity. My portfolio, bursting with the successful tech company project and new personal work, garnered more attention than ever before. I took on clients who valued my unique vision, my niche, and paid me fairly for it. The quiet hum of self-doubt was replaced by a steady, confident rhythm. I learned that my worth as an artist and as a person wasn't dependent on another's validation, especially not someone who sought to dim my light to amplify their own. My niche wasn't a weakness. It was my strength, my superpower, the very thing that made my art resonate. The path had been painful, heartbreaking even, but it led me home, back to myself. And that, I realized, was the most beautiful design of all.